Yesterday morning, I and many of you received an email that said, "Forget regret," or "Life is yours to miss." It was sent to us by Jenny and Christina Marie to invite us all here today to Business Theater Live. And just 5 minutes ago, before Jenny came out here, she was sharing with me her ideas and her thoughts and her dreams on Business Theaters Live's next season next year. And she's talking about simulcasting it and all these ideas. And then she says something very cool. She says, "We're going to change the world." And it's so fun to be around people who deep down inside want to change the world. Every one of us got up this morning and we made a conscious decision to attend Business Theater Live because we want to make our todays count. We want to do all that we can to capture all that life has to offer. And over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to invite you. I'm going to maybe even challenge some of you to live an even richer life by sharing with you my story. My absolute obsession in life over the past 22 years of helping people build wealth, ignore Wall Street, and get on with their lives. Because in my opinion, that's what life's all about. It's finding that point at which your dreams and your interests and your careers and your families and your passions intersect with the needs of the world. And then doing everything you can from the time you get up in the morning till the time you go to bed at night to align those passions with your actions, with your financial resources. Now, I've barely gotten going here, and I've already brought up the topic of building wealth and getting rich and Wall Street. And if you didn't know what my story was all about, it probably turned you off. I mean, when somebody wants to start talking about the stock market and this stock and that stock, it turns me off. I got to tell you, I get repulsed when I come across an infomercial or an advertisement of some yo-yo sitting on the beach trying to seduce you into subscribing to his 3-step method to getting rich. There's 2 problems with that. He's going to be the one getting rich, not you. And the second problem is you're pursuing his dream, not yours. The coffee house investor, the story that I share in my book, the story that we share with our clients at Soundmark Wealth Management has nothing to do with getting rich quick. It has everything to do with embracing 3 simple principles that you inherently already know to be true. They're principles that were shared with you long ago by someone much wiser than me. Principles that speak to the core of how we really want to manage our financial resources. But it kind of gets lost in the shuffle of Wall Street. I mean, 3 days ago, there's a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal that says you can download a Wall Street Journal app on your new iPhone to keep track of the market in your portfolio. And we start to tune into those things that are irrelevant, and we lose track of these 3 simple principles that you already know to be true. And I'm going to prove that you already know to be true by inviting you to shout out in unison these principles. The first one is there's no such thing as a free lunch. The second principle is don't put all your eggs in one basket. And the third principle is save for a rainy day. There you go. That's the coffee house message. That's the coffee house story. I don't have any secrets that I can share with you about getting rich quick. But I can share with you a secret of mine to living a richer life. And that is that I connect and I align myself with people who are getting on with theirs. And it starts from the time I wake up in the morning. My wife moved here from China 18 years and 11 months ago, and she knows that because the day that she moved to America from China with her son for a better life is drilled in her memory. And every day she wakes up and she says, "America, land of opportunity." And she transfers, she has to start from the very beginning, she transfers to a university called WSU, which most of you are probably not familiar with it. It's Wichita State University. And she gets a job waiting tables. I mean, she has to start her life over. And she gets her massage therapy license because she's always wanted to be involved in the healthcare business. And she opens up like a 3-room spa in downtown Redmond. And it does pretty good. She sells the spa, and she starts a little bigger spa. And I'd met her then, and she starts like a 5-room spa in downtown Kirkland. And at that time, we got married, and she decided to sell that spa. But I'll tell you, she didn't let go of her dream of building the #1 spa in the Pacific Northwest. And she was just chomping at the bit for her 3-year non-compete to get up. And she found a perfect piece of land in downtown Bellevue to start her dream of building the top spa in the Northwest. And she says, okay, I've got to get some massage therapists. So she puts an ad on Craigslist to get massage therapists. And she gets a response from someone, a 5-foot-tall massage therapist, and says, I don't want to be a massage therapist. I want to run your spa. I mean, how's that for connecting with someone who wants to change the world? And together, my wife, Z, and her manager, Sasha Sampson, have built this incredible spa in downtown Bellevue. I mean, they thought it would take 6 years to become the #1 spa. And already they're #1 on Yelp. And I'm driving over here, and I get a phone call. They're looking to expand that 8,000-foot space into 10,000 foot space and hire more massage therapists. And that's just me getting up in the morning. Then the real excitement starts. I kiss my wife and I go to work. Now you think I'm obsessed with these 3 principles. I have the pleasure of going to work and working side by side with 10 people who are more obsessed than I am about sharing these 3 principles with folks not only in the Puget Sound, but across the nation, bringing these 3 simples and principles, helping integrate these principles into their portfolios and into their lives. And we started at 0 15 years ago, and today we're in the top 50 of wealth management firms in the city of, or in the Puget Sound. And I only share that because when you throw out those 3 simple principles to people, they connect with it. And we're having the time of our lives. We're having, it's so gratifying to see people who are aligning their passions with their actions, with their financial resources. Sometimes I feel like I'm the luckiest person in the world because I was able to connect with people who are getting on with their lives at a very early age. I grew up on a wheat farm with 7 brothers and sisters in a part of the world that the National Geographic has so eloquently described as a paradise called the Palouse. And anyone who's been through the Palouse at this time of year with those green wheat fields, know it's God's country. You might not think that when you're sitting at the Apple Cup in November and you're freezing your butt off in 10-degree weather, but this time of year it's just gorgeous. Those fields turn golden in August. And the last thing you do before you harvest those fields is you've got to chop the thistles. Because if the thistles go to bloom, before long you're harvesting thistles. You're not harvesting wheat. And so every day during the month of August, for 10 years straight, my kid brother, Jim, who's 3 years younger than me, and I would be out there chopping thistles. It was dirty work. But as my dad would say, hey, somebody has to do it. And as fate would have it, our farm was conveniently located between Pullman, Washington to the north and Lewiston, Idaho to the south. And 5, maybe 10 times a day, a commuter airline, back then it was called Cascade Airways, would make the circle from Seattle to Lewiston to Pullman to Spokane back to Seattle. And 10 times a day, my kid brother Jim would stop chopping thistles and wipe his sweaty brow and look up and dream of becoming an airline pilot. Now, this kid did not know what an aileron was. He did not know what a stabilizer was. He did not know what a rudder or what the flaps were all about. He didn't know what a P factor was. But he knew one thing, beyond a shadow of a doubt, he knew that he'd rather be flying an airplane than chopping thistles. And so what does he do? He drags me into town with him. And we sit down and we talk to the local banker, who happened to be our grandfather. And my brother says, "Hey, Grandpa, I want to buy an airplane." And you know what my grandpa does? He goes to the back and he gives each one of us this. It's a passbook savings account. Now, for those of you who are under 40, you probably don't know what this is. But if you're over 50, you might still have your passbook savings account. You couldn't check your account online because there was no such thing as an online checking account back then. When you deposited money, you wrote it in here. When you took out money, you wrote it in here. That's what you kept track of, how much you were saving and spending. And my grandpa, maybe to humor my little brother, said, "Well, you know what? If you save $500 every summer, by the time you're 18 years old, you might be able to buy an airplane." Well, you challenge my brother to do something and he'll do it. By the time he was 18 years old, he bought himself a high school graduation gift. He bought himself an ultralight airplane kit. You know those ultralight airplanes where they kind of waddle through the sky and they've got like a chainsaw engine and they fly all around Arlington when you're going up north? He bought that kit. And together, he and I cleaned out our shop and we put that ultralight airplane kit together. And the last thing that we did was we made darn sure that the bolts that fasten the propeller to the engine were snug. And we opened the shop door and we pushed that airplane out the shop door. And I'll tell you, we didn't have the fanfare of politicians and dignitaries and balloons that are attached to the new rollout of a Boeing 787. But I'll tell you one thing. We had as much excitement in the hearts of those two farm boys as there were in 50,000 Boeing engineers. And he put on his football helmet and fastened himself in the seat. And we gave each other the thumbs up sign, and I started that engine by hand. And boy, I'll tell you, within 10 seconds, that plane was up in the air, and I started to freak out. We had two big problems. The first problem was he had never taken a flight training class. The second problem was I had never taken a first aid class. And he keeps on climbing, and I'm saying, "Cut the power, cut the power, cut the power," and he doesn't hear me. Finally, I think he figures it out. This is not going the way he had planned. So he cuts the power, and he gently comes down. He kind of softly crash lands in the wheat field. And I go running up there. I'm out of breath, and he's okay. He got up, he took off the football helmet, and he had a grin from ear to ear. He got to fly an airplane. And 3 years later, he got his pilot's license. And he was in the left seat, and I was in the right seat in that Cessna 182. I was his 152, and I'm his first passenger, and we take off from the Pullman Moscow Airport, and we fly down the deepest canyon in the United States, Hell's Canyon, which borders Oregon and southern Idaho. And then we returned, safe and sound. And somewhere this afternoon, there's an Alaska airline jet flying from Honolulu to Seattle, is captained by my kid brother. I mean, how's that for getting on with your life? Now, you're probably thinking, well, what does this have to do with planning for retirement and all this stuff? Well, here's where it gets very interesting, so you got to pay attention. 40 years ago, if you went to work for Alaska Airlines or Boeing or General Electric or PACCAR, and you did a good job, Alaska Airlines said, "Hey, we'll take care of you in retirement. You've worked at Alaska Airlines this long. You've achieved this seniority. We're going to send you a pension check for the rest of your life." They didn't have to worry about retirement planning. So you get a pension for $4,000, and the wife gets the Social Security for $2,000, and the husband gets Social Security for $2,000. That's how much you can spend in retirement. It's pretty straightforward. And that's kind of how our society had evolved for people who planned retirement. It was called a defined benefit plan. But that all was turned upside down and swept under the bus in 1982, when a CPA named Ted Bennett out of Philadelphia discovered paragraph K of section 401 of the Internal Revenue Code, which basically gave companies like Alaska Airlines the freedom to do away with their pension plans and present to people like my brother or my niece, who just graduated from Washington State University and is now working for Alaska Airlines. They said, hey, we're going to give you a retirement plan, but you've got to figure out if you're going to participate. You're going to figure out how much you have to save, and we're going to give you a choice of 10,000 investments, and you got to figure out how much, what investments are the right ones for you. We're going to give you a risk questionnaire and all this stuff. And, so my brother and 10,000 million other people now have a 401k that they're responsible for. Now, the irony of the 401k starting in 1982 was that was the same year that the longest bull market run in the history of the stock market got its start. From 1982 through 1999, the stock market returned about 18.5% a year, which is double its long-term average. And so bit by bit, person by person, investors started turning to Wall Street for a little help, and they said, hey, this is great. The market's going up 20% a year. I can retire, and your life was good. But my brother's smarter than that. He knows it's not going to last a lifetime, and so he and a lot of people turn to Wall Street for a little help. My brother says, hey, how much should I be saving in my 401k? And Wall Street kind of sort of says, you know what, it doesn't really matter. What you need to focus on is standard deviations and Monte Carlo simulations, and you need to be concerned about things like alpha and beta, and now it's smart beta. Oh, and we're going to throw in commodity funds and hedge funds and alternative funds and market neutral funds, and geez, I could talk for the next half hour and I wouldn't exhaust everything that Wall Street has tried to create for my brother and my niece to help them get to retirement. My brother is just saying, hey, how much do I need to save? The coffee house investor principle a coffee house investor focuses on three principles that my brother and my niece can focus on. And kind of the cool thing about the three principles is that the first two principles are pretty straightforward and pretty easy to address, which allows people to focus on what counts, and that's how much they need to save to get from point A to point B, which is retirement, and then how much they can spend in retirement so that they don't run out of money. The first principle is don't put all your eggs in one basket, and that's pretty straightforward. For most of us, investing in our 401ks, we've got two baskets. We've got stocks and we've got bonds. And so in looking at how you should allocate your dollars between those two baskets, you want to align it so that you are addressing the risk that affects you the most. If you're a 25-year-old, the risk that you have is not what the stock market is going to do over the next 2 years. The risk that you have as a 25-year-old is what the purchasing power is going to do to your money over the next 50, 60 years of your life. And we get a lot of young folks at Soundmark that are maybe sons and daughters of our clients, and they're nervous about investing in the stock market because they think, oh, the stock market, I'm afraid of the bear market and I'm putting my hard-earned money in it. And our response is, if you're 25 or 35 or even 45 years old, you've got your best earnings and savings years ahead of you, you should get down on your hands and knees and pray that the stock market crashes. I mean, it's just it's simple logic. I'd much rather be putting my money in the stock market down here than the stock market up here. And people think of that and they go, oh yeah. So now we've got a bunch of young people who are betting or hoping that the stock market's going to crash. Warren Buffett says he gets depressed in it when the stock market goes up. If you're a 65-year-old investor, though, and you're getting ready to retire, you want to make sure that you're never going to have to pull money out of the stock market to pay your electricity bill when the market goes down. So you want to make sure that you have the next 5 to 7 years of your cash flow in something that's more safe and secure, like bonds. But whether you have 30% or 40% in bonds, doesn't really matter. What matters is that it reflects broadly the risk that you can take. That's the first principle. The second principle is there's no such thing as a free lunch. Let's say you decide that you want to put 70% of your 401k in the stock market. And so now you're faced with 10,000 different choices of stocks and mutual funds. Which ones are the right mutual funds and investments to make in the stock market? You've got all of Wall Street saying, well, we're the best stock pickers, follow us. And you've got the local stockbrokers saying, well, we think we can beat the market. And it's like it overwhelms people. Well, the answer to how to invest in the stock market could not be easier. If you invest in the stock market, you basically have three choices. You can invest in individual companies. You can give your money to a professional stock picker through an actively managed mutual fund, or you can invest in the entire stock market. You can own all the good and all the bad companies combined. And as the stock market goes, so goes your portfolio. The stock market returns 8% annualized over the next 10 years. That's what you're going to get. Now, in looking at what choice is best for you, I am reminded of a quote by John F. Kennedy, who said, "The greatest enemy of truth is very often not the lie, contrived, deceitful, and dishonest. It's the myth. Persistent, persuasive, and unrealistic." And the two greatest myths of investing in the stock market are, number one, that great companies make great investments, and number two, that professional stock pickers can find enough good companies and avoid enough bad companies to consistently outperform the stock market over time. Let's look at the first myth real quickly. Do great companies make great investments? Well, the example that I use is the company that's right next to us here, Microsoft. Over the past 15 years, that company has made a bagazillion dollars. They've just made a lot of money. Sure, they've had their challenges, but they're making money hand over fist. Guess what the price of their stock has done? It's down from 15 years ago. Why is that? Well, when you invest in a company, let's say you invest in Starbucks, Starbucks has nothing to do with the company, with the price of the stock. There's no committee on Starbucks that says, oh, this is what the price of the stock is going to do. There's a complete disconnect between Starbucks and the price of the stock. The people who set the price of Starbucks stock are the thousands and millions of investors who buy and sell it all day long. So when you're investing in Starbucks, the company, really what you're doing is you're not investing in the company, you're investing and you're betting on the emotions of people. And that, the professional stock pickers have shown, is easier said than done. Over time, 8 out of 10 professional stock pickers underperform the market. 8 out of 10 professional stock pickers underperform the market. Wall Street says, well, hey, we can find the 2 or the 20% that consistently outperform the market. And they're good at that. I mean, all you have to do is look at the Wall Street Journal, and they're saying, hey, you know, we've got these 5 stars, blah, blah, blah. So what I did in my book, I shared a very simple example of the choice you can make. What's your first name? Vicky. Assume for a second that there are 10 boxes here. And the first box has $1,000 in it, the next one has $2,000, and the last one has $10,000. And you know how much is in each box. It's not a trick question. Which box are you going to choose? The $10,000. It's a no-brainer. Now, I'm going to change that scenario just a little bit. Let's say I'm going to show you that this one has $8,000, but I'm going to hide the rest of them. Now, which one are you going to choose? Why? She's going to choose the $8,000 box. Why is that? Yeah, it's a sure thing. The chances of you beating the market are slim. It's not zero. But here's the tragedy of this. And there was a great article on this in Sunday's New York Times. The average investor is switching funds every 3 to 4 years. And while the stock market has reproduced this, and 80% of the mutual funds produce this, the average investor gets this. That's the tragedy of all this. And so the first two principles of diversifying according to your need and ability to take risk, and the second principle of investing in low-cost index funds allows you to focus on the third principle of save for a rainy day. Are you on track? And that's what we do all day long at Soundmark, is we allow people clarity on whether they're on track or not. And you know what? People love it, because we have found that people want to be responsible for their financial well-being. It's just that they get caught up in these wristwatches, and they don't really know what's important. And what's important is how much you save and how much you spend. And that's what a financial plan does, to give you the opportunity to see if you're on track or not. And you can make adjustments along the way. But at least you have that clarity and you have that peace of mind to allow you to align your actions with your passions, with your financial resources. Now, I cannot leave without sharing with you a story. One more story. Another brother of mine, Bernie, he's still a farmer. And when he was growing up in high school, he loved sports. We all played sports. He and his buddy Dan were great athletes. They won a bunch of state championships, and Bernie went on to play baseball at Washington State, and Dan went on to play baseball at Stanford. But while they were going through high school, and while I was going through high school, the girls' teams were horrible. I'm not sure they won a basketball game in 4 years. They were terrible. But that's the way it was back then. And so Bernie and Dan come back to that little town of Colton, and they get married, not to each other, to their respective wives, and wouldn't you know it, they have girls. And so Bernie and Dan put their heads together and they go, we got to do something about this. So they march into the superintendent and they say, we want a key to open the gym door. And the superintendent gives them a key, and they get their little girls in there, and all they do is they give those girls a basketball. They don't coach them, they don't do anything, they just run up and down the floor dribbling the ball. And pretty soon they got more little girls dribbling the ball up and down the floor. Well, fast forward to today. My niece graduated last Saturday. That girls' basketball team has won 6 straight state championships. They just, in March, they won the state championship. They scored 94 points. They've got the record for most consecutive victories by girls' teams in the state of Washington. And 4 more victories, they'll have the record of all boys and girls basketball teams. And it's simply because, Bernie and Dan, they opened the door. And life is not about winning state championships. Life is about looking for opportunities to open the doors in our own lives so that the people that we connect with can get on with theirs. Thank you.